Yeah, so I think a lot of a stigma about ADHD comes from um, public uncertainty that it's a real medical condition and not an excuse for so-called laziness. Wow, you guys are just popping off here. It's great. Um, Michael from Virginia, nice to have you. That you could outgrow it, that it's in your head, you're lazy, you just need to concentrate more, and it's from bad parenting. So we know that all those things are false. But I think what happens is, oh, and you just need to make a list. Oh, that's nice, Sheila. Um, Allergies. Okay. So the stigma about ADHD comes from a public uncertainty that it is actually a real medical condition and not an excuse for laziness. And the inconsistency of ADHD symptoms, depending on the task, the situation, or the environment, makes this disbelief worse. We know from Dr. Thomas Brown that inconsistency in motivation is one of the most confusing aspects of ADHD. And that motivation itself is a combination of action plus a reason to engage, and that it's about really believing you can do it and having the skills to get you there. So that this idea that somehow because you have inconsistency in motivation means you're lazy and not that it has anything to do with ADHD is just false. Hi, Gail. Nice to see you. Other issues that contribute to this stigma include socioeconomic issues and ethnic factors, a negativity towards medication to treat ADHD. And we know that stigma is a risk factor that affects finding and sticking with treatment, life satisfaction, and mental well being of people with ADHD. Um, Many people with ADHD believe that they have a core deficiency, that they often think they are defective at some level. Um, I'm curious if those of you who are attending feel like you have a core deficiency, like something is fundamentally wrong with you. This is what a teen I was working with yesterday said to me. So I think something is fundamentally wrong with me. Again, I'm sorry for the beeping. Um, do you think that something is fundamentally wrong with you? And if so, what? I'm curious to know if that's something that you carry around, because I think that's kind of internalizing the stigma. Um, Something Jelenic says, my little girl certainly does. So what happens is that, when we live in a culture that denies who we are, we sometimes start to do that for ourselves. Pat Kelly says facial recognition issues. My inner child still sure does. I did before I knew I had ADHD, chemical imbalance. And Nisi says, I do think that something is wrong with me because there is something wrong with me. But I do my best to make it my friend, and I do my best to make it bothersome to others, or not bothersome to others, or minimize it. Sheila says, my life is now making a lot more sense. I'm glad to hear that. So many people still don't believe that ADHD is a real thing. There's like a myth that it's not real, and it's a recent psychiatric invention. And the facts are that ADHD is a very real, biologically based condition. Kids and adults with ADHD are wired differently. We have lower amounts of dopamine or norepinephrine in our brains. And that accounts for difficulties. We have executive functioning deficits in some areas that are more severe than in people who don't have ADHD. And then we sort of are mad at ourselves or ashamed of ourselves for having those things. Interestingly, hyperactivity, impulsivity, and distractions seriously and persistently interfere with daily living. And they are real. And ADHD is not a fad. It's been documented in the medical literature. There was something that was in the literature from the 1700s, but since the early 1900s, we've seen documentation about ADHD in the literature. So there's some comments here that I'd like to respond to that are really quite interesting. Um, Mark says, I feel like I have to work harder than everyone else. Right. You have to prove that you're better than everyone else, or just to actually feel like you're the same. Nisi says, I have a terrible memory. Like I can't even remember people who were important to me in my life, and now I have no recollection of them when they're in front of me. And that's got to be hard and kind of embarrassing. Cheryl asks a great question, Cheryl Ann. How do we stop being mad at ourselves? I struggle with that part. And so I think that's what we're going to talk about today, actually. How do we struggle with being mad at ourselves? And also, how do we struggle with being mad with deniers? Weeza says, my family won't acknowledge my diagnosis as an adult, even though I am reasonably certain that my whole immediate family is neurodivergent. Yes, denial is not just a river in Egypt, right? It's something that we face all the time, that's directed toward people who are neurodivergent, and also neurodivergent people may direct it toward themselves. So as we continue to celebrate ADHD Awareness Month here at Attitude, I'd like to offer you support and suggestions for dealing with people who don't understand what it's like to live with ADHD or believe that it truly exists. Maybe it's your friend, your boss, a teacher, coach, family member. ADHD misconceptions and false myths negatively impact people with ADHD and those who support them every day. Here are some comments that people just like you have shared with me. And I've divided them, excuse me, into categories. One second. We're going to talk about some of these things that you're saying here. Nobody talked about it years ago. They just drank. Yep. I always get, we're all just a little ADHD, so it's normal that you do that. Okay, this drives me insane. Sheila, thank you so much for saying that. I'm going to talk about that because that's just such a dismissal of the seriousness of living with ADHD and the challenges. Okay, so the first common misconception about ADHD is that it's a lack of willpower. I'm tired of hearing that I'm not trying or I just make excuses. People think I don't want help. What I don't want help for is someone to tell me to do something that makes no sense to my brain. People think we are just hyperactive, lazy, or stupid. They don't understand that we need a different way to understand concepts or approach tasks. So one of the biggest ADHD misconceptions is that people with ADHD don't have willpower. But actually, people with ADHD have a lot of willpower because you face every day and do the best you can while living with significant executive functioning challenges. You have determination. You try to apply yourself to a variety of tasks in a variety of situations. Lower levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain make it much more difficult to muster up the energy and concentration for things that seem uninteresting or unfulfilling. And yet, kids, teens, adults with ADHD figure out how to do this when they have access to appropriate supports and when they learn strategies that assist them in moving forward. You or your child are a neurodivergent, outside the box thinker, which can be a great asset to any project, classroom, team, or job. I believe that you are warriors. So when someone says something about laziness or a lack of willpower, consider responding by saying, ADHD is a biologically based condition that affects executive functioning skills such as organization, time management, and planning. I'm building those skills every day. If you'd like to learn more about ADHD, I'm happy to share some information with you. ADHD is a biologically based condition that affects executive functioning skills severely. I'm building those skills every day. If you want to learn more about ADHD, I'll share some information with you. You can certainly refer them to Attitude, where there's plenty of information. Remember that you are a warrior. You are not a failure. You are not deficient, regardless of what others think. Nobody knows how much effort it takes for you to get through each day and accomplish things. Any comments about that, about ADHD being a lack of willpower? Have people received that? And what do you say when someone says that to you, that it's a lack of willpower? Here's a misconception about ADHD. Everybody has a little ADHD. A little ADHD, ha. That's called distraction. People think if you're not hyper and wild, you don't have ADHD. Don't we all have ADHD because of computers and smartphones? Okay, this is a lot to break down in this section, number 2. So, there are different types of ADHD: hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and combination type, and different levels of symptomology: mild, moderate, or severe. However, there is no such thing as a little ADHD. It's not like you're a little, you are a little diabetic. You can have a low level, you can have, mild diabetes, or you can have more severe diabetes, but you still have diabetes. And of course, we know that technology does not cause ADHD. I like this person who said a little ADHD, ha, that's called distraction. We are a distracted society. Everybody's distracted. People touch their phones thousands of times a day. People have shorter attention spans from spending time on their computers, from using technology, from watching video games or films that are edited much faster with quicker shots. Using technology and multitasking can exacerbate symptoms of inattention and impulsivity, but they don't cause ADHD. ADHD is rooted in a person's neurology. It's hereditary, or it can be something that occurs if your biological mother was a drug user, or drank and maybe even smoked, if there was some sort of complications at birth, or if you have a biological brain condition, or you perhaps have an injury to the prefrontal cortex or a different part of your brain. It's a biological condition. And that's why everybody has it is not a valid statement. What we have today is a distracted society, with kids and adults alike accustomed to being virtually connected at all times and expecting immediate responses to questions or problems, and engaging in multitasking, which doesn't really exist in the brain and increases distractibility and teaches our brains to have shorter attention spans. That's not the same as having ADHD. Statements like the ones I said before, these statements such as everyone has a little ADHD, people think if you're not hyper, you don't have ADHD, and don't we all have it anyway because of technology? These statements minimize your experience as a child or teen or adult who lives with ADHD, or as a parent of someone with ADHD. And it's easy to feel hurt or angry when you hear them. So while you might feel frustrated by these statements, you need to have a response in your pocket. So what I say, or what I encourage you to say, while all people can feel distracted and preoccupied at times, that is very different from the biology of having ADHD. It's important that you do not let their ignorance diminish your lived experience with ADHD, and that you continue to focus on, shoring and nurturing those personal strengths and using them to help you kind of adapt to and deal and cope with your weaknesses and challenges. So I'd like to see what people have to say in the chat. Let's see. The chat is not moving for me. Oh, there it is now. Okay. It absolutely is a dismal and makes me angry all the time. My son seems to get the blame for everything at school because other kids know he's a hothead and blame him for overreacting when he gets angry or upset. He hates school now, but his dad thinks he's just trying to manipulate me. When he's being blamed, what it seems like what's happening to him is actually a form of bullying, Gemma, because people know he has ADHD, so he's an easy target, and it's easy to blame things on him, even though it's not his fault. They always just say squirrel, and it drives me crazy. It's not distractions. Sheila, I'm literally standing here forgetting what I was doing while listening in. No problem, Sheila. It'll come back to you. Weeza, my sisters think I'm a flake, and I was often called lazy as a child. Also a party pooper because I'm not always interested in group activities like board games. I don't care because I struggle to communicate, and time blindness and object permanence, even with people. I mean, I don't call often. If my mask slips and I become dysregulated or overwhelmed, I've been told I'm wrong to feel as I do. I've had the concept of RSD used as a means to invalidate and gaslight me. Oh, Weeza. Oh, this is so sad. I am really sorry to hear this. And I think the important thing for you is to make sure you are not invalidating yourself, and to say to people some of these phrases. While all people can feel distracted and preoccupied at times, that's very different from the biology of having ADHD. Very different. I wish I caught what you said. I loved it. I just said it again. Okay, ADHD, paraphrase. Being distracted once in a while is fundamentally different than having the biological condition of ADHD. Thank you, attitude. Right. That's great. Here's a third misconception. ADHD means lower intelligence. Well, I'm just going to tell you this is completely false. And here are some statements. The assumption is you can't be at the top of your class and have ADHD. Kids with ADHD don't have the same abilities as kids without it. How do I convince my daughter she's not broken, but needs help to teach her the skills that she is just lacking? Having ADHD doesn't mean your brain is broken or your intelligence is lower. In fact, Your Brain Isn't Broken is the title of my friend Tamara Rozier's book, which is wonderful. There's more than one way to view intelligence. Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner's theories of multiple intelligences suggest 8 to 9 different types, including visual spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, naturalistic intelligence, and more. The reality is that everyone has stronger areas of intelligence than others, ADHD or not. But even if you're simply concerned about IQ, ADHD is not correlated with people having lower IQ. It's correlated with people having lower scores on certain factors that contribute to IQ, working memory, and processing speed. But it has nothing to do with being unintelligent. A person with ADHD might also have a lot of knowledge on a particular subject, but struggle with the format of the tests they're given. Many people with ADHD think, process, and recall better in less distracting environments. Some think better when they can move around or fidget. Some need to do verbal presentations rather than written reports. They might need more testing time or flexibility to express their knowledge in different ways. Thus, we can't effectively assess everybody's intelligence with a single testing system that wasn't designed for neurodivergent people. So yes, psychoeducational testing can be very useful, and I think it's an important tool to help us figure out what some of your cognitive strengths are and what some of your challenges are. But it's not the only thing we want to use. We want to get a sense of how someone lives in their environment, which is why rating scales are so important. A lot of comments here. Show you right. Preach, sister. Thanks, Dot. Um, Carolyn, I did okay in school because I am an information geek and I like learning. Plus, I had Catholic guilt. So I have been told I can't have it. No one sees the eternal messy house and so much more. Right. So you were able to mask or camouflage some parts of the places where you struggled. And they, just because people didn't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. A couple of girls at my daughter's school were bullying her last year. At lunch once, they were intentionally needling her, and when she got really upset, one turned to the other and said, "See, it's so easy. She's so emotional about everything." That is horrible. And I don't know how to say your name, Smy, but or Smee, but I just want to say that's awful. Sheila, yeah, totally false. I just got an IQ test and I'm 120 in some areas during my eval. There you go. Dot Red, I wish I could stay, but I had an ADHD coach. She taught me that once I learned to develop executive functioning skills, my brilliance will shine. It took me a long time to accept and begin to tell myself that I am brilliant. Thank you. You're most welcome. Sheila, I scored lower on time tests, yet average on everything else, and was yet average, but everything else was higher than average. Right. So that we call that, an internal discrepancy, a within person discrepancy. And many people with ADHD have this within person discrepancy. In fact, many people who are considered twice exceptional have this as well, because some scores are very high and some scores are quite a bit lower. And so it's confusing both to the person and to the people who work, live, or teach with that person. Mark, this was a big issue for me. Once I told work I had ADHD, my boss stopped giving me challenging work, thinking I would burn out, and that made me burn out worse because I got bored with mundane work. Right, so it's not that you can't handle the challenges, is that what you need is help setting up the scaffolding around the challenges so you can meet them. Jessica, thank you. It's nice to be reminded that ADHD doesn't mean you're stupid. Never means you're stupid. And time tests. So what I want to say about time tests are a couple things. First of all, and a lot of the reason that a good psychoeducation evaluation for ADHD includes cognitive tests or time tests and rating scales is because time tests don't account for two things in cognitive assessment. They don't account for initiation and they don't account for sustained attention, two pretty important executive functioning skills, because people tell you when to start and when to stop. Time tests in other areas don't allow for people who struggle naturally with time blindness, that's people with ADHD, and who might have a lower working memory or processing speed scores on their cognitive evaluations, and so it takes them longer to pull out relevant information from their memory and apply it to what they're doing. Or it might take them longer to just actually do the work in front of them because they process information more slowly. One of my clients explained that their processing speed, which was lower than their verbal and spatial skills. It's like this, Dr. Sharon. A file comes in my brain and those papers go everywhere. And then another file goes in my brain and those papers go everywhere. And I start to pick up the papers from the first file. But then another file comes in and those papers go everywhere. And another file comes in and those papers go everywhere. And now there are 4 files and I'm still working on picking up the papers from the first one. So I'm processing things more slowly. I need more time. Let's see. Sam, my name is Summer. Thank you. It didn't come out that way in the typing. Sorry. My 8-year-old is 2E, and it's a struggle with school because she forgets things like starting sentences with capital letters. So teachers think she's careless or needs more practice, but her verbal processing IQ is 160 and her overall is 147. So thank you for sharing this, Summer. I think this is really important information. So, she forgets to start sentences with capital letters because her brain is firing so fast that she's trying to get the information out. And this is why we have spell check and grammatical check. And, if there's any way for her to learn to keyboard, I think that would be really helpful and speed the process along of getting key information out. Sheila, yeah, I struggle with time blindness and transitioning between events and discussions. And Summer, people just don't know how different ADHD can show up or understand the concept of uneven development. I agree. People don't understand the concept of uneven development at all. Okay. It's common and it's dangerous. It's a common and dangerous ADHD misconception to think low intelligence is linked to ADHD. And we have seen this historically for people of color in the United States who have been considered developmentally disabled or have low intelligence because they have a learning disability or they have ADHD. There can be racial bias, and this is why many people of color don't want their kids to have a diagnosis of ADHD, to deal with another label, and why they don't feel comfortable trusting the medical system as well. So how do you respond to this hurtful ADHD misconception that it means that it has lower intelligence? Let's try a couple of these phrases. ADHD does not correlate with higher or lower intelligence. There are many types of intelligence, and people with ADHD are often intelligent in areas that interest us compared to areas that don't, because of how our attention is regulated. There are many types of intelligence, and people with ADHD are often intelligent or even gifted in areas that interest us compared to areas that don't, because of how our attention is regulated. Though people with ADHD can struggle in school, it has much more to do with the accessibility and flexibility of the learning and testing systems than it does our intelligence. People with ADHD struggle with school because they struggle to access and apply information that they have. Let's see. Heather, can you briefly summarize what twice exceptional is? And Summer did that for me. Someone who is neurodivergent and intellectually gifted. It's when you are gifted and you also have ADHD, or you might have a learning disability, or you might be autistic, particularly what we see as level 1 on the autism spectrum, which used to be considered Asperger's. Okay. Now, what is the fourth misconception? Having ADHD means less success. My partner thinks our teenager won't get into a good college because of his ADHD. I don't see the point of trying to sell my art. No one's going to want to buy it anyways. People think that those with ADHD will always be a little behind on their peers. So here's the facts. The brain matures from the back to the front and the inside out. The last region of the brain to fully connect with the rest of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. In neurotypical brains, that happens around age 25, and there's up to a 3-year delay in the connectivity for people with ADHD. Does that mean that you're always going to be behind your peers? No. What that means is you have executive functioning strengths and challenges, and you live with those strengths and challenges, and you will need skills to help with those challenges. Medication can be a catalyst, but pills don't teach skills. So it's not that you're behind in any way. It's that you struggle in ways to apply things that you know in a timely or effective fashion because of executive functioning challenges. So growing up, it might seem like adults assessed how well we would succeed in life based on our school grades, athletic achievements, the ability to make and keep friends. Sometimes it might have felt that your success as a teenager was going to determine the rest of your lives. Kids and teens can get the impression that they're destined for failure when they experience struggles in schools. But that's far from the truth. Unfortunately, this belief can negatively impact their mood, self-esteem, and motivation. Kids with ADHD who struggle at school have come to a place where they believe that they are not, that they will fail, that they are a failure, because either adults around them are telling them that, or adults have been unable to understand and therefore help them effectively, or they've been the victim of bullying and teasing from peers to make them feel like they are fundamentally deficient. This reminds me of something that I want to say. I am offering a webinar, and I'm going to post it right here, right now. It's on raising kids with ADHD when you've got it yourself. So when you're neurodivergent yourself. I really hope you'll consider joining me for this. It's on November 8th, so I'm giving you lots of warning. And I think it's something that would be really helpful for a lot of people here. I'm also going to put one more time in right here in the chat the link for the downloadable on how to harness grit and get it done, which has tips for executive functioning skills as well. Okay, so let's go back to the fourth issue here, which is ADHD means less success. So it's hard to ignore the many social influences that we encounter every day that promote limited ideas of success anyway. What does success look like? What should it look like? Is different than what success means to you and what you think it needs to look like. Because we have to be we have to determine our own levels of success, not somebody else's shoulds at all. You're going to make choices that reflect your own goals. Focus on your strengths, your interests, and your values. What would you like to accomplish because you want to accomplish it? That's a question I'm asking you to put in the chat. What do you want to accomplish because it matters to you? That's where success starts. So tell me what it is that you want to accomplish. Carolyn says the brain development difference makes it sound to me like everyone should catch up and be the same, but that may not happen. No, the brain development has to do with the pathways, really being articulated and clear. But if you struggle with certain executive functioning skills, you're going to continue to struggle them with an adult. You may just be able to manage them better. So, I struggle with time in that I think I can always do more in a given amount of time than I can, or I take on too much, or I might not leave enough time to get to a place, so I'm late. Has this gone away for me over the years? A little bit. It's gotten better because I have tools to use it. Is it still there for me? Yes. And does that mean my brain's not fully developed? No. It's just that in this executive functioning skill, I'm not very strong. Sheila, I want to run my own business that I can be interested in at the same time to get out of the workforce. Thank you. Anybody else? What is something you'd like to accomplish because it interests you? If you have ADHD, you might notice your interests change more frequently than your peers. This might mean that your idea of success changes too. And maybe you are someone who works at a place for 10 years and then works at another place for 10 years. I've had a lot of nurses in my practice, or emergency, like EMTs, or people like that, who change jobs because after a while, because they get bored and they take their skill set and apply it somewhere else. It's true for teachers as well. So that's something that I want you to think about, that's normal instead of not. If someone is questioning you or your child's ability to succeed, I'd like you to consider saying something like this. What it means to succeed is often different from one person to the next. People with ADHD might need accommodations in certain school, work, social, and community settings, but we can thrive academically and professionally and socially and creatively. We often live successful and fulfilling lives. It's just that you may need accommodations to make that happen. Rather than believing that people with ADHD don't have the means to succeed, how can you focus more on helping yourself or someone you love with ADHD access the support and accommodation they need so they have more opportunities to succeed? How can you help someone you love or work with have the opportunities they need to succeed, to apply their unique intelligence in a way that serves the world and serves them? So I'd like to ask that question to you. What does success mean to you, and how can you make that happen? How can you make that happen for yourself? Gail says, having my house simplified so I'm not distracted by things. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.